Hey, that's Mark Lindsay over there.
I know that dude. That's Eloy Escagedo.
Well, it's great to see you come around here, dude. I haven't seen you in quite a while.
Yeah, fancy meeting you here. It's like a week just whipped right by, like 7 days.
Well, we'd like to welcome you back to Trampled Underfoot Podcast. And your hosts are Mark Lindsay and Eloy Escagedo. How's it going? What's been going on with you?
Oh man, just work. Just working outside, working inside, catching up on emails, catching up on private messages. I tell you, this social media thing is a double-edged sword because on the one hand, it's extremely cool to be able to, find and re-meet friends that you had, from like high school or what have you. And, I keep up with family and friends and this, that, and the other. And also I promote my YouTube stuff out there and everything. But it gets to the point to where you all of a sudden get buried. If somebody says something and all of a sudden you're barraged with private messages and everything. And it's like, you can't be rude. You can't just ignore people. You have to say something. But it's like, I can't sit here and chat all day long, guys. I got stuff I have to do. I still got paint on my hands. I was out painting on the new shed earlier today. I didn't even have a chance to go take a shower or nothing. Ate dinner and jumped in here. I was late posting promos, the whole thing.
Well, I mean, we do this for pleasure, and our audience appreciates it.
Well, it's what happens when you retire, man. You get busier than heck,
Here's to retirement.
Yeah, well, I need to go get a job so I can get some rest.
Yeah.
Take a break. Oh, wow. But anyway, seriously, folks, have you ever had a song stuck in your head and you just absolutely cannot flush it? Even if usually I can go listen to it and it's over. I move on to something else. You ever have a song stuck in your head, no matter how many times you listen to it, it's still there?
It used to happen to me more than as I get older. It'll stay for less time.
I mean, just thankfully it's a good song. It's not by a group I hate or anything like that.
I get a lot stuck in my head, 50s and 60s songs. Like, just like poppy stuff, like my boyfriend's back and there's gonna be trouble. And I'm like, why do I have that in my head? Or whatever,
Yeah.
I met him on a Sunday and my heart stood still, and it keeps, and I'm like, why am I thinking that one? It's like, what the hell?
Well, the song that I have stuck in my head, and I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there. The song I have stuck in my head is What You Won't Do for Love by Bobby Caldwell from 1978.
Okay.
You remember that tune?
How does it go?
I don't sing. What you won't do for love. You tried everything, but you won't give up. It's kind of a smooth jazz kind of.
Okay.
You know the tune.
I'd have to listen to
it. Let you know who got a thing for you, and I can't let go.
Oh, okay. I got you. Now I know. When you hit, you sort of hit the melody there, and then I said, I grabbed onto it.
Grab hold of it. Yeah. It's a good song. It's a real good tune. And what got me on that tune was I kind of thought this was going to happen, but I wasn't sure. There are now people reacting to reaction videos and putting together compilations of reaction videos. So you have all the reaction channels out there where people are listening to music they've never heard and they give you their opinions and this, that, and the other. And that's cool. That's fun. But now you have people taking their reactions and compiling, some of the best reactions to this tune.
Yeah.
And that one came up in my suggested, and yeah, they got me. I'm like a trout, hook me and reel me in.
Yeah.
And it was about 75% of the people who reacted to this song, had heard the song once it started playing. But in the music video, the guy is sitting at the very beginning, he's sitting on a bench in the dark. And he starts singing, then he stands up and he kind of moves towards the light. And about 75% of the people, including me, thought this Bobby Caldwell was black. And it turns out he's white as the day is long.
The boy's got soul, huh?
The boy's got soul. But his voice, I mean, everybody right down the line, oh my God, I knew this guy was black. There's no way this is a white guy. This dude looks like Indiana Jones. What are you kidding me here? You know, and I didn't know it either. Well, I read further into the tune. The record company knew it. And as a matter of fact, when they released the record, they didn't promote it for like 8-9 months because they wanted to keep this guy's identity hidden.
They said, we got gold here, folks. Let's try to keep this under wraps.
But it was the MTV generation. You know, it came out in, what was it, 78? Yeah, 78. Came out in September of 78. And so by that February, they had to put out a music video. And it's him sitting there singing.
There's a lot of guys that got the soul going, but that style comes from, you know, the African Americans, you know, from back in the day that busted out that, because it came from the hymns and stuff, you know, that sort of like whatever you want to call it. I can't put the words together, but it came from them. And it became a thing. It became an incredible variation on mixed pop music, like different little melodic, as opposed to a straight up, you know, singing the vocal. So it is kind of a good moment in frickin' music history to have that incorporated. And a lot of white folks did sort of, because there's something about it, right? The soul of it. I guess they would call it.
And that came out. In fact, that was the name for it, was Blue Eyed Soul. I mean, and that started with the Righteous Brothers, with You Lost That Lovin' Feeling. And there were people back then that swore up and down, just knew that they were black people singing, and they just weren't, you know. And then You're My Soul and My Heart's Inspiration, and then Unchained Melody and all the rest of them. And it was called Blue Eyed Soul. It was basically soul music, that, as it was referred to at the time, but white people singing it.
You know who sounds really soul, but they're not from the R&B world? Herman and the Hermits. Mr. Brown, you've got a lovely daughter.
Yeah, there you have the other end of the spectrum. I mean, those people have zero soul whatsoever.
Isn't that funny though, how they do? And yet they did do some great hits, Herman and the Hermits, regardless.
Yeah, but you got to remember that was bubblegum pop, man. That was targeted to 14-year-old girls.
Well,
so
I was sitting in my bedroom at the age of 13, moving through the oldies station, and you'd get Herman and the Hermits, followed by the Turtles, and then maybe a Beatles song. And since I didn't quite catch each, it was all homogenized. And it wasn't until later that I started to see the categories. But taking it in that fashion, as opposed to how you took it in, where you knew from the get-go the different categories of music branches, I took it in whatever the radio fed me from the oldies station. And to me, it was a tapestry. It was weird. It was, in a way,
well,
I was listening to a rock opera without knowing what a rock, because I homogenized it in my mind. So I thought, oh yeah, that's cool. You know, Herman and her, and then listening to the Beatles. It's a weird way that's how I consumed it. I didn't know any better.
But it was that way back then as well, because it was popular music, and we're talking about AM top 40 pop and rock. So you would have, and it was a blend, it was a mixture. I mean, you would have something by the Turtles, or but then the next tune might be Earth, Wind, and Fire. Or, well, no, that was much later in the 70s. The next one may be the OJs. Then you would have something by, oh my gosh, the Cowsills. Then you'd have something by the Temptations. I mean, I got just as into Led Zeppelin as I got into Marvin Gaye. I mean, the theme from Shaft by Isaac Hayes was real high up in the charts. Curtis Mayfield was another big hit. Stevie Wonder. I mean, it was all there, and it was mixed together. It was all blended together in this big jumble. And they just went down the list and they just played the music. So you got it all. And nobody likes every song. So, you had 3 or 4 channels, and if a song came on that you didn't like, Sean Cassidy or something like that, you hit the next button. And it's like, okay, Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody. And that would play, and then now here come the Temptations. Oh, all right, cool. And then Rod Stewart or whatever. I mean, so it was all this big magical jumble in there. And we hear a lot today about people being exposed to a new style of music. We were getting it all at once. And it didn't matter. I mean, I had Isley Brothers albums right next to ZZ Top. So, it was all right there. If it's good, it's good. And that's all there is to it.
Yeah, so, I agree. And it's fun to have those different sort of like colors and tapestries of sound design, because everybody does have such a different variation on playing a single chord. Accompanied by, like the combination of chords with vocals and lyrics and stuff. And it just becomes, wow, you could be listening to frickin' The Band one moment and then, move on over to, I don't know, what was that band from what is the
Dave Clark 5?
The Dave Clark 5.
Yeah.
Just anything like that.
Yeah.
I do remember though, I don't know. Were you bused home?
There were in elementary school. Let's see. We moved around a lot when I was a kid. I was bused in first grade. I was not bused second and third. I walked to school. We lived close enough. And then fourth and fifth, same thing. I walked, and then sixth grade, I was bused. So, it just depends. We moved around a lot. So,
did you have, they were public school buses, right?
Yeah.
Did they have a stereo?
No. Nope. We were lucky to have wheels. It was, Fremont Unified School District in the Bay Area, California. Somebody always had a radio or a boombox or something. I mean, especially sixth grade and on. Junior high, I rode a bus. High school, I rode my bike and then I drove.
Because, well, we were going to school during the advent of the Walkman.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, that was a huge. I remember when they came on the scene.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little kid, and I wanted one because the idea of being able to, and all the kids brought them to school, just across the board, and we weren't allowed to have them. You had to keep them in your book bags at that point. Which people, what one of the tricks that people would do while in class, like my friend would come in and he was a total rocker, and he'd have an Anthrax cassette, Among the Living, and he says, hey, I got Among the Living, yeah, and I'd look and I'd say, let me hear, and he'd give it to me. All we needed to do was exchange cassette tapes, and I would have my book bag, and I'd put the cassette into the Walkman in the book bag, and then run my earpieces, like that, and I just cover Oh, it was
Mhm.
one ear most of the time.
Yeah.
And be jigga, 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 and you'd be listening to it in class and repeat that across the board. But the Walkman was a liberating thing, and then people just everywhere. That was something that was cool that we all had. Everybody had their little Walkmans.
I had a cassette Walkman, cassette and FM radio. And they came out in like 79. So I was 18. I was married and already had kids, or had a kid. And but I was working construction at the time. So it was something that I could do to more or less entertain myself. But I found that flipping over the cassette and putting a new cassette in it to be a pain in the butt, because you couldn't always, you're up on a roof or something like that. You can't really take a break and go back down and grab cassettes. You couldn't carry them in your pockets because, you had tools and nails and all that other kind of crap.
Yeah.
You couldn't get to your pockets half the time because of the nail pouches and all that other good stuff. So it was more of a pain in the butt than it was worth, really. I mean, the first few minutes was great until you had to flip the cassette over, then stop, flip the cassette, turn it back on and go for it. And then that's it. You had to wait till your next break to go swap out cassettes. So, but flip it over to FM radio and we were good.
It was an awesome addition to our world, because all of a sudden you had this portability. And then I think on par with that came the boom boxes as well.
Yeah.
Where people would literally
Yeah.
be carrying them on there. And I did the same. My parents bought me a little one that was really good. And I carried that one around Sweetwater. It's ridiculous, but I did, playing heavy metal.
Yeah.
But the cultural thing was to play like, it wasn't rap back. I think was it rap? Yeah, it was rap back then. I don't know what they called it, but that was the traditional thing.
Well, it was R&B and then it morphed into rap. Yeah. But there was, all genres of music were being blasted everywhere. And that was the thing. Throw the boom box up on your shoulder, blasting the music. And, a lot of folks were glad to see the Walkman come out. It's funny to mention it because it was still cassette. It wasn't CD yet. But when I was stationed at Fort Ord, California, so we're talking early 1980s, because I got there in like April of 82. April of 82, I got to Fort Ord. And it was a post regulation that you could not walk around with your headphones on, even in civilian clothes. And that was because two people had been hit by cars. They just didn't hear the car coming and stepped out into traffic. They weren't paying attention and got hit. So the post commander just said, no more earphones, no headphones at all while you're out walking around. So that's when everybody started getting bigger headphones and just wrap it around their neck so they could still listen to the music, but it wasn't covering their ears. So.
Well, I wanted to also mention, going back to the bus situation, that for our bus, we had the school bus, the yellow bus or whatever. But the driver would play music. And various years, and it's funny because so they would always play what was called bass music. Which was a style that was influential here in Miami and New York. I believe that it was like back and forth, and it was just basically deep bass drum and crappy lyrical, It was basically horrible. And there was a song amongst that. So they would take songs. There was a song called Diamond Girl that went, Diamond Girl, you make me feel da 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 da, and it would keep Diamond Girl, oof, off, Diamond Girl, oof, and it was like annoying as hell. Well, they would take those songs and they would remix them into these 45-minute long extravaganzas of like basically what that neighbor of mine does, where he's freaking, with the craziness. And it was, dude, you know what? That kind of crap's been following me around for a long time. It's like a little freaking.
Did he used to be your bus driver?
It sounds like it. So they would play that on the bus the way home, and they never played the rock and roll. It was always that crap, shallow, soulless, no grit to it, no gut. I mean, even like ballads, can have, that goodness to it. But all this style of music is like this shallow, empty shell of. It's soulless vampire. It's soulless alien blob life form music. And that's what they played. So it's been around for a long, that kind of emptiness.
Yeah. Oh, it's been around. That's been around for years. I mean, you're right. Man, I don't know. We sound like two old poops sitting out on the front porch, but it is the truth. I mean, you can take something like Yesterday by Paul McCartney. That has meaning to it.
Yeah.
Even 25 or 624 by Chicago. That's awesome. Meaning to it. Oh, it's a great song. It's an excellent tune. But I go back to what I said a couple weeks back when I think we were in a hangout. I don't even know if we were doing the podcast or if we were just in a hangout. Something that I've noticed is that back then, the singer, with a few exceptions, the singer was basically singing to the girl. Now they sing about the girl. It's not to the girl, it's about the girl, to bragging to your friends or whatever. I mean, there were exceptions. Runaround Sue was not to the girl, it was about the girl. But there was a meaning to it there. Today, man, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know if we've just run out of creativity, if we've run out of ideas, or if we've run out of people who are willing to bear that much of their soul out there.
Well, it's also a matter of, there's that. And plus, it depends on what pays and what the industry is willing to pump out.
There's a lot of truth to that, too.
But there's also that you said about, have we run out of ideas? I think, sure, you take anybody and you give them a guitar or a synthesizer or this or that, they, by hook or crook, are going to do some variation that is in itself unique. And so you could invent sort of new things because there's always variations.
Sure.
But what theme has never been touched upon?
Well, and that's what I mean. Is everybody afraid to be the guy that comes up with the next sappy love song? Or is
that's it? You just invented the next hit single. We call it I'm not afraid to sing the next sappy love song. You just freaking wrote a hit and not even knowing it.
Paul McCartney already did it. It was called Silly Love Songs. It came out in the 70s.
But did he use the word sappy? I don't think so.
I just changed one word, dude.
That's all that.
If I put it out, it would be a ripoff of Paul McCartney singing Silly Love Songs.
Not if you sang it not if you sang it country style with a rap beat to it and 5 fiddlers playing with electric fiddles.
Yeah. Okay. Call it hick hop.
Hey, you know what? See, there is hope for humanity. Hick hop. Hick hop.
It's already a thing, Eloy. You ain't listened to country in a while, have you?
Oh, there's hick hop?
Yep.
Without ever listening to it, I can tell you right now I hate it profoundly.
I don't know, man. I can get into some Toby Keith. He sings some nice, sensitive songs, but he is an absolute nut with most of his stuff. I mean, I want to talk about me. Who's your daddy? I mean, some good songs. And the message is silly, but it's fun.
I guess one thing that I don't like about, and it may have changed because I stopped listening to it when it came out. talking about rap.
Uh-huh.
I was turned up, although that's not truly the case in reference to Body Count, which was a offshoot. What they did was they played heavy metal and then the singer rapped over it. And there's been a lot of that. So I can deal with that. But the story content, you know what I'm saying?
It depends on what it's about. One of the better tunes that I've heard was Run DMC and Aerosmith doing Walk This Way. That was a good collaboration. That was a real good collaboration. And they put the words to Walk This Way to that hip hop beat. But it sounded good. It fit. You know?
It pissed me off when I first saw it. And so did a lot of our friends. It's like, what the heck is rap doing in our rock and roll, man?
Well, to be honest with you, it kind of revitalized Aerosmith's career because they were heading down fast.
No, I know that, but I'm saying at the time, as kids, when it came out, we were like, what the hell, man? That's not how it should be.
Yeah.
And because there's a lot of that, but I owned one Rum DMC album, which was called Raising Hell, in which that song appeared. So they did win me over, but they were, because of their mixing with the rock and roll, they did win me over, believe it or not. So I still have the record, Raising Hell.
Yeah, that was 86. So I was already, oh boy, I'd been in and back out of the Army and was getting ready to go back in. So I had discovered Stevie Ray Vaughan by then. And
I had not.
I had discovered Stevie Ray Vaughan and Dire Straits and Mark Knopfler and all that.
I had none of that was on my radar. Stevie Ray Vaughan didn't. I never told you this, but did I ever tell you? This is crazy. It's not crazy, but it's just. Did I ever tell you how I discovered Stevie Ray Vaughan?
Uh-oh.
So I wanted to make a band. I had no idea who Stevie Ray Vaughan was, but I was totally into the Beatles and this and that.
Yeah.
And it was a time when I guess I had buddies of mine playing in bands and stuff. We had basically, it hadn't worked out, let's say. Mm-hmm. And I was basically looking to, what am I going to do? And so I read a little post hanging on the guitar store's wall, and they said, we like the Beatles, things like, what was it, Please Please Me album, and this and that. And I was like, well, heck, that's exactly what I want. Mm-hmm. And so I called, and the guy said, well, we're looking for a singer, not so much a guitarist necessarily, but if you can play guitar, that's good too. And I was like really looking to play guitar, because the whole singing thing to me was like totally not my. Yeah. And so I went to his house. It took a freaking long drive to get to his darn house. Already I was like, oh crap, this is not going to work out for me. I don't want to. But the dude, we took a drive in his car and stuff, and we jammed a bit, and he played the whole album, Please Please Me, and rocked it, and it was so cool. And the dude was a cool looking guy and everything. And we went back to his house and stuff, and there was a poster of Stevie Ray Vaughan. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh, who's that? And he explained to me. And then one day I was at the CD store, the record store, and I saw a Stevie Ray Vaughan album, the white one. Mm-hmm. It's Texas. No, it's the white one.
Crying.
The Sky Is Crying.
Okay, that was after he died.
Yeah, that's what I'm telling you. I learned about him the year or whenever.
That came out the year after he died, yeah.
That's when I found out about him.
Wow.
And I bought that album, and I was freaking tripping with it. And it became so much that I bought music books, just the whole slew, and the VHS tapes, everything I could get my hands on, because it was so monumental to listen to him. Yeah. I was blown away. away.
Me too. I had not heard anything off of Texas Flood, his first album. I hadn't heard anything off of Couldn't Stand the Weather, his second album. All of a sudden, I heard this tune played. I was working at a hardware store, getting ready to go back into the Army. I heard this tune come on the radio. It was Say What? It was just instrumental. But it's like, man, this dude can play. Holy cow, this is good.
Yeah.
And so I listen, okay, Stevie Ray Vaughan and Say What? I was like, okay, fine. So I went down to the record store and I found the album, Soul to Soul, and I bought it.
That's an awesome album.
And I mean, front to back, front to back, front to back on vinyl. I mean, I played heck out of that album. So I got to go check out what else this guy has. That's when I found Texas Flood and Couldn't Stand the Weather. And I think I wore out Couldn't Stand the Weather. And that was when I learned how good of a guitarist he really was. Because when I put on Voodoo Child, his version of Voodoo Child, I was like, this is the only guy who can out Hendrix, Jimi Hendrix. This is crazy. If he did this in one take, this is crazy. And then I don't even remember where I was at, but visiting somebody, they had a videotape of one of his live performances. And it was like, have you ever seen this guy? Oh, I've never seen him play, but I've listened to him and this, that, and the other. And he watch this, and he put on Voodoo Child. And I don't even remember what concert it was. It's just like, God damn, he does that live. He plays like that live. Holy cow,
It was amazing, wasn't it?
Crazy, absolutely crazy. I turned another guy on to him when we were stationed in Hawaii. I went to Radio Shack, and he had Voodoo Child by Hendrix was playing on their stereo. And I'm like, oh, who's the Hendrix fan? And this guy waves over to me. Yeah, I am. I'm that. Hendrix is this and Hendrix is that. And I said, have you ever listened to Stevie Ray Vaughan's cover of this? He said, nobody can play like Hendrix. I said, wait a minute. I ran out and I grabbed the CD out of my car and said, try it. That track right there, try it. And he put it on and his jaw dropped. He's like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, you got to listen to this guy. It was just craziness.
So are there, so I have a few in mind for myself, and I was just thinking about this now that we're on this topic.
Okay.
Throughout your life, and we've talked roughly about this. Mm-hmm. I'm sure Steve could confirm that.
Yeah.
But throughout your life, have you had marked moments, no pun intended, where the song is so sort of burned into your memory that you can go right back to the exact moment you were when you were listening to that song, regardless of whether it was the first time you listened to it or on a consecutive, but a memory or various memories where the song simply connects with a time in your life in the past?
There's a lot of tunes that do that. There's a lot of tunes that do that. I mean, if I hear Hendrix' Star Spangled Banner, I'm teleported back to when I was 8 years old, sitting in a chair sideways in front of our big console stereo with headphones on, listening to the Woodstock soundtrack album. My dad brought that home. They went and saw the movie. It was rated R. My mother was a prude. She wouldn't let me go see it. I was 8, 9 years old, So the soundtrack album came out. My dad bought it. And I would sit there with the headphones on in front of that console stereo, just blasting it away. So every time I hear that, that's where I'm teleported back to. AC/DC's Back in Black takes me back to driving my Plymouth Duster on the freeway. I mean, just cranked,
That's awesome.
And just foot down and cranked up, just dun, dun, dun. Yes, I'm back, and that's it. There's all kinds of stuff like that. I can picture myself in certain places at certain times doing certain things when certain tunes come on. It's
Well,
not always a clear memory, but there are
a little Barry Manilow in the background.
even that. You just said Barry Manilow. My ex-wife, one of her favorite song was that Copacabana when it first came out. She loved that damn song. So you say that, and I'm driving with her down one of the roads here in Medford, and she's singing along with it and bopping. I mean, just little goofy things like that.
So I have some. I'll give you some specific ones. So I forget the name of the song, but it's "What a Feeling." Dun, dun, dun.
Okay, yeah. I can't think of who it is, but I know the song you're talking about.
Where it starts with that synthesizer, dun 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 dun.
Probably in a couple of movies.
Flashdance.
Flashdance? Okay.
I remember I was in private school, sitting in the bus, and that song coming on the radio on the bus. I was a little thing, and I heard that for the first time. Mind you, that's not heavy metal, rock and roll, this and that. I was a little kid, but that sound reverberating through in that capsule, on that drum that is the bus, burnt itself into my head. And to this day, when I hear it, I literally stop and will listen to that song.
Yeah.
I will listen to it. I mean, I'll listen to it maybe halfway through and then, okay, that's enough of that. But I'll listen to it enough that, another one is that I remember very clearly was Billie Jean.
That is one of those songs that embeds itself in your brain. And that leads me to another topic. But go ahead.
So I remember Billie Jean, and the way I remember it is I was living with my grandparents, my aunt, and my mom. My folks had separated for that year, whenever that year was. Well, that song was on the air, and on TV, Saturdays, there was Casey Kasem's top whatever hits, and he'd play the video.
American Top 40, yeah.
And my aunt would turn it on as they were getting ready for whatever activity during the Saturday day. And that came on, and I sat there and looked at it. I was like, wow, that's totally, and there were other songs there, but I remember exactly me sitting there in that room, a few miles from here. I know exactly where the place was, but I was a little kid. And I remember Michael Jackson, that song. And likewise, the last one I'll say, there's so many that just like you, is I remember being with my friend in his room. We were little kids, and his room had posters and stuff of rock and roll, and he had taken his parents' Christmas lights, which I had copied after I saw it, and he had taped Christmas lights along all the furniture around posters, and he put it in, and then he says, yeah, let's turn off the lights. And it was so trippy. And so I busted out my parents' Christmas lights, and I did the same thing in my room. And my parents, it's a funny thing back then, and always, if I had some crazy thing, they wouldn't, unless it was like life-threatening, they really wouldn't. But he had a cassette tape of Ozzy Osbourne's Bark at the Moon, which he loaned me. And I remember popping in the tape and listening to the whole thing. And I remember always the one ballad. I remember the whole album because I played that to no end. But I remember the one song, that ballad, as a very powerful thing, sitting there listening to it, which was So Tired, where Ozzy Osbourne is singing a ballad-like song. And it's really freaking, I like it a lot. Heavy synthesized, the whole album was, with heavy guitars. But I literally, in my mind, that snapshot is still with me to this day. Yeah.
The opening organ chords to Styx, Grand Illusion, that entire album was an excellent album. I mean, that and Paradise Theater, both of them, had them both, played heck out of them. But iconic tunes that drive you back into certain memories at certain places, certain times. You made me, when you mentioned Michael Jackson and Billie Jean, it brought something to my head that I don't know if we've talked about it or not. Can you think of a performer or a song that when you first heard it, when it first came out years ago, maybe you were into different styles of music or what have you, absolutely hated it. But now, as you've grown older, you've heard it a few times and it's like, you know what? That was some pretty good stuff, man. We got to give them credit where credit is due, because Billie Jean is that way with me. When Michael Jackson was doing his thing with One Glove way back when, I was not into that kind of music at all. I was way, way, way out of pop. And I was into blues and progressive rock. And I wanted nothing to do with no Michael Jackson. I'm like, get this guy out of here, man. But now when I can actually listen to it, you know.
That's a funny thing. So I'm going to tell you a pretty embarrassing moment, you know, now that I'm such an adult and all this and that, but you're still that same kid, but you're not. You're that kid plus all the experience of life. But I'll tell you an embarrassing moment that nobody saw but myself. So if I never mentioned it, nobody would ever know. But why not? Because, you know, why not? So something that I didn't like when I first, but then later loved. My mom had given me money to purchase a rock and roll album that I wanted. And I went to our local Sweetwater little, just like you open the door and you walk a few feet and you're done with the whole music section. That's it. And I picked up Bon Jovi's Slippery When Wet. And it was a cassette, and because my friends had said, yeah, man, you got to get Slippery When Wet. It's awesome by Bon Jovi. Really? It's good? Yeah, you got, man, they rock, dude. They rock. And I went home with it, and I got on my bike with my Walkman, and I turned it on, and I started pedaling down Sweetwater. I know exactly where it happened, and this is the embarrassing thing. When I heard Bon Jovi start to sing, I literally started crying. The welling up inside, when I heard the first intro of the song, the amount of upsetness at the crap that I had bought and spent that money. I literally was riding bike with tears in my eyes, riding down the road saying, I bought this crap. I don't want this crap. This is crap. And I even took it to my friend and said, dude, this sucks, man. And I was crying. And he said, oh, no, they're awesome, dude. I said, no, man, it's not good. It's not good. I felt so cheated. And he said, oh, I'll buy it from you. And I was all pissed, man. But after a few plays, I got into, because, you know, what are you going to do? It's like that happened a lot. Not the crying bit, like I learned after that. But oh, man, did I buy that? Because a lot of times you couldn't listen to the song. It would have to, and you wanted to buy a tape or whatnot. And so you just buy it and you take a risk. And you had to learn to either leave it alone and you felt like cheated, or learn to like it. At least that's how I dealt with, you know, because that's how, and I learned to like it. And actually, I actually liked it after a few listens. But it was,
that little bit of that bitter disappointment that you felt was almost what I felt with that Joan Jett and the Blackhearts album. One song was good, the rest was crap.
I love how you said almost, but you didn't want to go.
It didn't quite bring me to tears, you know.
No, but you had to have. I remember imagine a kid biking and you press and you're biking and you hear the sound, and I started and dude, it was, and that's embarrassing for me to say because it's such a petty, you know what I'm saying? It's such a petty thing.
Yeah.
But you're a kid, you know, what are you going to do?
Well, you know, you only know so many emotions, and, you know, you're not big enough to beat anybody up. So all you can do is cry.
I mean, and by the way, throughout the years, I bought more Bon Jovi albums because I bought like 2 or 3 more because I ended up liking them. But my initial Plus, what taste does a kid have?
Yeah.
You
Well,
develop that.
Yeah, and that is true. And you also develop a little bit of an ear, and you start appreciating what you're actually listening to. Now,
Yeah.
flip it around, turn it the other way around. Were you ever pleasantly surprised? Because I can remember, which album did I get? It was Grand Funk Railroad's All the Girls in the World Beware. And this was one of those things. I don't know if you remember the Columbia House Record and Tape Club.
I do.
You send them a penny and they'd send you like you picked out these tapes or records or whatever.
Yeah.
You were in this club, and then they would send you a record, and if you didn't like it, you could return it. But if you didn't return it in time, you bought it.
Yeah.
Well, that was one of these. It got sent to me, and it was like, look at this. It's a bunch of muscle men on the cover. I never put it on. It was like, oh, what a bunch of crap. And so I never even played it. And of course, it was, it was too late for me to send it back. So I ended up having to keep the thing and pay for it.
And that must have hurt.
I never listened to it. I never even put it on the record player. Then one day, it was my birthday, and we had a bunch of people over, and I was like 15, something like that. And a bunch of my friends were over, and my dad put that album on the stereo. We had the speakers out on the patio, and he just put it on. And people started dancing to it and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, damn, this is pretty good. Who is this? Where did Dad get this? And I went in, and it was that album, and it freaked me out. I was like, holy cow, this is actually some good stuff, So did you ever have any kind of a pleasant surprise like that? I was like, holy cow, wait a minute. This is good stuff. I thought it was going to be trash.
Well, to be honest with you, I can't think of one. I'll give you something within the range, but it's not. I bought, and I've told you this one before, but what the hell? I bought Bob Dylan live at Budokan. And dude, when I first played it, I was like, number one, I hated live albums. Hated it. I hated it because they weren't. I want them in the studio, frankly. I didn't like the live. Even to this day, I'm not too much of a live album kind of guy. But I learned to like it because I paid for it. But none of the songs, he didn't sound like the album, dude. He played all his hits.
Yep.
And it was like a double album, I think it was. But it was like atrocious. And then the people clapping and cheering, it's like, shut up. Like, I don't want none of that. I just want my rock and roll. And so I was really troubled by that, and but I learned to like, and I liked the album. Now, don't ask me to play it nowadays. I'll tell you, maybe for memory, but
if I'm not mistaken, I think it was our 100th episode. I may be wrong. We did our top 3 or top 5 worst records. And I think you picked that as your number 1, didn't you? Live at Budokan?
As my worst record? I don't know that I did. Did I?
I think you did. I don't remember. There's only one way we can find out, and that's head over and listen to it again on the Trampled Underfoot website.
That's
TrampledUnderfootPodcast.com. Click the Wayback Machine button. And Eloy, I think you chose your top 3, and I chose my top 3 worst albums. And I'm laughing about this because that Joan Jett and the Blackhearts I Love Rock and Roll album was one of my worst. One of my least favorite albums.
We had a friend that, and you have to understand, and which I know you guys do, but back in the 80s, there was a certain attitude. And I don't believe that it was just a Miami thing or localized to Sweetwater and or even more so between me and my friends. I do not think that. I think that this was an attitude that was prevalent across America to one degree or the other. But you were a rocker.
Mm-hmm.
You wore the rock and roll. If you couldn't afford it, you dressed in black, roughly thereabouts.
Yeah.
And you were listening to the heavy stuff. You did not buy Poison albums. You did not wear Poison shirts. and there were categories of cool. I know this sounds shallow, but I'm just recounting the past at those years. If you had Metallica or Anthrax or Megadeth, you were a badass mofo. If you had, you could have any number of, even if you had Aerosmith, you're like, oh, Aerosmith, okay, well, look where this guy's going. If so, there was all these things, but you didn't wear Europe the band shirts as a guy. Well, we had a friend that we'd visit and play D&D with and stuff, and he lived further, and we'd bike ride to him and stuff. Great guy, awesome guy. But this is just one of those funny stories because we were stupid anyhow. So what are you gonna do? But he had a huge Europe poster and Europe freaking cassettes, and it was just Europe everywhere. And we couldn't believe, oh yeah, he's a Europe fan. Oh man, Europe, what are you kidding me? Europe, that's crappy. We used another word, but guess what word that's so crap. And so, but he was totally into Europe, and we'd always joke with him, and we'd go, when we'd see him, we'd go because it was so ridiculous. It was so non-manly for us kids, and the whole attitude, G.I. Joe and Commando and friggin' Arnold Schwarzenegger, just everything from the era was like war, fight,
tough, testosterone city.
You know how they say America now and all that? Dude, the people today, and I'm sure there's badasses all over the place, and I'm in no age bracket to argue the point, but in front of them. But but to be perfectly honest, you want to talk about America, that was the 80s, man. I'm sure all generations have, but there was prevalent on TV. They encouraged you buying guns, toy guns, exploding rocket ships. Everything was like destroy the enemy. It was freaking awesome, dude.
Well, that was us in the 70s. Ted Nugent and Stranglehold. I mean, God, guts, guns, and rock and roll, and that was it. And you were listening to Led Zeppelin, you were listening to Ted Nugent, it was craziness. It was insanity, but it was a lot of fun. I mean, you couldn't put Stranglehold on and not feel your foot hitting that gas. And it's not a fast song. But I guarantee you, if I'm listening to it in the car, I will look down and I will see that I'm at least 15 over the speed limit.
I'll be honest, because we had someone comment about Poison and Warrant. I'm going to be honest. That's what we said. All that I said before, that macho stuff, that's all well and fine. But in private, my rules were it's okay to. So I liked what was the song "Smoking in the Boys' Room"? I think it was Poison, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was Brownsville Station in like 1973. Poison covered it, or somebody covered it.
Well, that's what I mean. So I think Poison. Well, I liked, and Every Rose Has Its Thorn. So there was ballads. So there was moments. So I did own 2 cassettes of Poison. Mind you, that takes points off of your rock and rollness back in the day.
It's kind of like riding a moped. It's real fun, but you wouldn't want your friends to see you doing it,
Exactly. But I would never have dreamed having a Poison shirt, going to school with the Poison shirt. That would be death, So I did own that. And Warrant, I owned Warrant's first album as well. There was a band called the Bullet Boys back then too. There was a lot of bands, and as the decade came to a close, and then the grunge, like they were mentioning, jumps in, it all ended. It all ended completely. End of the fun.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I never really. Okay, Motley Crue covered Smoking in the Boys' Room. Okay. See, that shows you how much I know about hair metal. I remember Brownsville Station.
Yeah. I mean, so what are you going to do? And now that attitude, you're talking about kids. Sure. And I remember how we thought, this is not how we think nowadays, although,
Well, you figure in 85, you were what, 14?
I'd have to do the math.
No, 85, you were 10.
10.
So 88, you were 14. I was 27. So I was already, married and divorced, and 88, I was remarried. So it's, there's a large generational gap there. So the whole hair metal thing, I missed it. I couldn't tell you the difference between, and which is why I didn't know the difference between Motley Crue, Poison, or any of the others, or Rat, or Cinderella, or any of those. I couldn't tell you.
It was catered literally to me, to my generation, and kids of my generation, within a few years over and below, but it was catered to our generation. All of that, but it was played by people of your generation.
Yeah.
People coming up, they transformed the music into that hair metal, heavy metal,
right,
from the David Bowies and stuff prior and all that. And they created this whole new thing.
Yeah.
And so in reality, I mean, Ozzy Osbourne is a little bit older by a lot.
But think about that. Let's run with that. Ozzy Osbourne was of our parents' generation. I mean, the Rolling Stones, Pink Floyd, the Beatles, all of them were of our parents' generation. They were of about the same age. So we grew up, we used to tease our parents about their music, but the music we were listening to was being performed by the people of their age. So it's kind of a strange little juxtaposition there.
It totally is.
You have guys in their 20s, and we're listening to guys in their 20s and early 30s when we're in our teens. So they're already, way beyond us.
See, another thing is that for our generation, everything, so we didn't have, like, let's say when you were young, you had these people dressed with just the weirdness that they were dressed in. And you could argue that when I was young and I'd look up to the people, they were dressed weird, but the rockers that we had, that we looked up to, were wearing a truckload of like earrings, and they'd have these shirts that were rock shirts that were tore on purpose, that made it look like just sag. And then they had leather jackets.
Right.
And they'd be walking down the road and stuff. There was this whole motorcycle type look without the motorcycles, is what it was. It was, it was badass. It was badass, dude.
Well, I mean, and a lot of that transferred from the 60s. It went away. Well, kind of died down in the 70s, but it came back in the 80s. Just they glamorized it. In the 60s, it was seen as every guy. I mean, the Levi's and the Levi jackets, or the leather jackets and everything else. But it was, you were being the every guy. You were being the outlaw. You were, wild and free and that kind of thing. And in the 80s, it just became glamorized. And we've talked about this before. Hair metal was the stepchild of glam rock.
Yeah.
David Bowie, Gary Glitter, the rest of them. So, but I just did a little bit of looking here just to kind of prove the point that we're talking about. I remember, like I said, sitting in front of that stereo listening to Jimi Hendrix when I was 8 years old. At that time, Jimi Hendrix was 2 years older than my dad.
Yeah.
So we were listening to our parents' generation, but not our parents' music.
Right. Yeah, that seems to be the case. And then the kids coming up emulate it for the most part. And but the grunge thing sort of had a laissez-faire type vibe, throw caution to the wind. We don't need to be that neat and tidy with our musical, song construction. And they took a page from the punk rockers that were, I guess, became more pop throughout the 80s. In the 70s, as it started into the 80s, they were really bashing out the tunes in a wild, frantic, unorganized dirty sound type of thing, but it became more popish. And then the grunge people that came in returned to that in a sort of way with their attitude and towards music. But I think they ruined it. I mean, I think, I mean, they did good, but at the same time, they did some good musical stuff. There was a lot of good musical stuff, but at the end of the day, if it's all negative.
Well, when punk started going mainstream, I knew that it was over. I mean, when you turn on the radio and you hear the Clash, punk is over as a fad. And that's exactly how it ended, you know. So, well, that's an hour. I don't have a buzzer anymore. My buzzer's broke, but that's an hour. So you want to go ahead and wrap up and then hang out and holler with the folks in the chat over here?
Yeah. We do want to mention that we go live every Tuesday at 9:30 Eastern Time and 6:30 West Coast Pacific Time here on YouTube, and that's Trampled Underfoot Podcast on YouTube. We also have a Facebook page, and that's Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook, and over there you can catch posts that we post about the topics. Maybe we'll think of a picture or some sort of list that might be interesting to you, relevant to the show, and we'll post it over there. So you might want to go over to Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook and check it out. And you want me to do one more, or you want to take over from here?
Well, since you asked, I'll go ahead and take over if that's okay. Let's not forget trampledunderfootpodcast.com, sponsored by Steve Nealon over at Harley. See, I mess up his name every time. That's okay. It's my edit. I can leave this in. Steve Nealon over at Harneal Media. That's what I was trying to say for those of you who can speak. He's the sponsor of Trampled Underfoot Podcast.com, and head on over, check it out, hit that Wayback Machine link up at the top center of the page, and that'll take you back to all of our previous episodes. This being episode 127, there are 126 episodes for you to catch up on, and we're talking about life, the universe, and everything. That's Trampled Underfoot Podcast.com, sponsored by Steve Nealon over at Harneal Media. If you're looking to start a website, maybe you want a web store, you have products that you make or have made and you want to sell them, you want to sell digital downloads, you want to create merch, t-shirts, hats, cups, whatever, Steve is your man. He's your one-stop shop. He can take care of you. Very excellent prices. That's harnealmedia.com.
All right. Well, I couldn't have said it better myself.
Oh, you probably could have. You wouldn't have, tongue-tied and stumbled over your words. But
as soon as one thinks that, you're looking to get tongue twisted. So yeah, folks, we'll catch you next time. Listen, enjoy your week, and we'll see what we have in store for you in the next episode. So have a good evening.
Bye-bye. Okay, that's a clean break. All right. Boy, I have so much to say. There were so many comments over here in the chat. Hi, y'all out in the chat. For those of you who are just joining us, I see we have Rick French and we have TLAS, the new faces that I haven't seen. JP Woodwork even jumped in for a minute. What we do is we record the first hour for our audio podcast, and then we get to go back through all your comments and see what you had to say. Let's see. TLAS came in and said, saw SRV open for In Excess in an outdoor amphitheater, I think 1988. Oh, man, I haven't thought about In Excess in years. Holy cow.
They were a pretty sweet band. They were sort of in that world of like U2, but not really, as opposed to just the crazy hair metal necessarily. I think the guy did end up overdosing or something like that. The singer did. Um,
I don't know. I can't remember. The only one I knew by them was "Need You Tonight." That's the only tune that I know
yeah,
by them, and that was like 1987. And I just
yeah.
had to look it up. I can't. I couldn't remember the name of the tune.
I can remember the music though. Da
Mhm.
da 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 na 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 na. I
Yep.
need you tonight.
Yep. I couldn't remember the title of it. I had to look for it.
I got to let you know.
You know what? There were a lot of good bands back there that maybe they were popular for a little bit and then they went away real fast. And I never quite, I don't know. Maybe it's that second album curse that you put everything you have into your first album, and then everything after that is just kind of meh.
It's hard to please. It's a very hard thing to please millions of people so that you stay relevant. It's hard enough to please yourself. So it's
Uh-huh.
a difficult, endeavor. Um it's an impossible endeavor. You could take a crappy song,
Hmm.
literally. You could have a guy with a tin pan and a like washboard and belch on record. And if the media, if the record, I'm sorry, the what do you call radio stations and everybody got behind it because of some sort of, and you played it enough, people would be like you and I would be sitting.
Uh-huh.
Some people in the future would be sitting in a podcast like this saying, "Man, you remember that washboard song? It was so awesome," because all of it is this sort of programming people to tell them what they like, and people usually go with the flow. I mean, that's all the marketing. I mean, literally, that's we like the songs because we actually heard them, and we heard them because they wanted us to hear them.
Yeah, there are two cases that I can think of that prove your point. Absolutely. Do you remember William Hung?
No.
You don't remember William Hung? He was a household name years ago. He did he went on I think America's Got Talent or the X Factor or some American Idol, and he's an Asian guy who can't sing, can't dance. He's like me, there's no end to the things he can't do, but he got up in front of those judges and he did a version of Ricky Martin's She Bangs.
I remember now.
He put out an album, and it was all because of that TV show was his popularity. It went absolutely through the roof. He put out an album and people bought it. He's a motivational speaker now.
There you
It's just
go.
basically, whatever. I mean, he knew he was never going to make it in the music industry, but he gave it his shot. And because of the way they treated him, he became popular and he sold a crap ton of records. So, hey, you know,
I mean,
another case is I can remember back in it was either the late 80s or the early 90s because it happened while we were stationed over in Germany, but I don't remember exactly what year it was. And I don't remember the circumstances about it, but some recording engineers went into a cathedral and they recorded a group of monks doing their Gregorian chants.
I remember all that.
They were just singing out their prayers. And that became an absolute rage. I mean, everybody had that CD for a couple of years. So there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. If it hits and it hits right, the sky's the limit. It can just go absolutely nuts, but you'll never be remembered for anything else.
See, I'm even going a step even crazier and saying that it doesn't. The consumer is not of no consequence,
Right.
but it's not the fame pushing over the edge to fame component necessarily. It's all the marketing. If everybody gets behind it and choice words, everybody's looking for things to purchase. I mean, just there's the pet rock. What the heck is that?
Yeah.
Or look at the clown pants that they had in the 80s with MC Hammer and stuff. Was it a marketing scheme preordained? And
that's what I mean by you never know what's going to hit. Now, TLAS, and I think I'm pronouncing your name. I don't know if you want to say TLOS. He said In Excess had several top 40 hits, definitely not a one-hit wonder. That's not what I meant to imply. It's just that they came and then they went. Now, I understand, yes, the Michael Hutchins killed himself. I understand that. But there were a lot of other bands that came and went relatively quickly when they should have had a longer run. I mean, the Pretenders, good band, real good band, had some good hits. They came and went before they should have. Boston, that's the prime example. Their first album was astronomical. It was absolutely nuts. It went through the roof. That was when I was in high school, that album came out. And if you didn't have that album, you just weren't getting a date. And that's all there was to it. You were nobody if you didn't have that album.
Let me add
their second album, not so good. Kind of there.
Now that you're saying all that, can you, and there has to be, can you picture the fan base, hear me out, of Milli Vanilli?
Oh, yeah.
Pre-incident with the lip syncing and post-incident with the lip syncing. There has to be an amount of a percentage of fans that regardless of when they saw the lip syncing debacle, they were like, well, I'm sorry. I just love me some Milli Vanilli, and I'm gonna pump up the jams. And they were so stubborn, bullheaded, they kept going with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That all that happened while we were stationed in Germany, and they still played it on the radio, and people still turned it up.
It's horrible, dude.
Because if you like it, you like it, and that's all there is to it. It doesn't matter. I see some people over here in the chat, Snow Crusher and Jim Bashir's talking about Tiny Tim. I remember Tiny Tim. I remember Tiny Tim marrying Miss Vicky on the Tonight Show. Tiny Tim tiptoe through the tulips. Now people wouldn't give him a second look,
It's a sad, but he squeezed it and juiced it for all that it's worth.
Sure. He had to write it. You have to write it. I mean, it's being handed to you. You'd be stupid not to, my wife Linda is out there saying, remember the singing nun. Domonica, Nika, Nika, Domonica. Yes, I do. Very much so. It's been just weird stuff. Rick French says, no one has mentioned Meatloaf. I can listen to him one album after another. He had a very kind of strange career that went up and down, but yeah, I'm with you. Bat Out of Hell was another album. If you didn't have that album, you weren't getting a date, and that's all there was to it. It was, let's see, the big ones were, you had to have Frampton Comes Alive, Boston, Leonard Skinner Pronounced, Fleetwood Mac Rumors. You had to have Bat Out of Hell, and there was one other, Aerosmith, Toys in the Attic. If you didn't have those albums,
Toys in the attic.
If you didn't have those albums, you were not getting a date, and that's all there was to it.
Dude, I loved Aerosmith, even the old stuff. Well, the old stuff was really good. But there was a shift of I guess Run DMC moment. Mm-hmm. There was the pre-era of them, and they had some freaking awesome things that were just like there was this rock and roll to it. Mm-hmm. And they had one called Mama Ken, which Guns N' Roses redid.
Uh-huh.
They had some really cool. I had their best hits from back in the. It was like a red cover with a white logo
Yeah.
on it and stuff. But the Meatloaf thing, although I don't know how many albums he did. I think it was 2 or 3.
He did.
Probably.
He did a few.
He did a few.
He did at least 3 that I know of.
His music was spectacular, and plus
Yeah.
with his songwriter and stuff, and he just became iconic.
Yeah.
So there's people that become iconic, and even though they're not prolific necessarily, they're so iconic that you're just like, okay, well,
Yep.
We accept him as his, him or her as is. And
Meatloaf was also all about the theater. Whether you were seeing him live, and I've only seen videos of him, I've never saw him live, but whether you saw him live or you just listened to the album, it was all theater. It was a theater of the mind. Jim Steinman wrote epic music, and that's all there was to it. I mean, you didn't have the catchy beat. You didn't have the catchy chorus. There was no hook there really to drag you in, maybe on a couple of songs.
Dude, there was, but in a different way.
But yeah, 2 out of 3 Ain't Bad had that hook, but Paradise by the Dashboard Light didn't, because it went in several different directions.
Dude, I don't see it that way.
It was a 3 and 4 part tune. It was a medley. I mean,
what you're trying to say is that it wasn't pop format back to the chorus.
Exactly. This was not a 3-minute tune that you put on top 440 radio. They did that with 2 out of 3 Ain't Bad, but the song Bat Out of Hell, I mean, that was an epic tune. It was all about theater, and that's what made it so great.
Hey, listen, I know you haven't seen this, and I think you would enjoy it. So I did recommend, or I did not recommend. One time I mentioned a movie, which I didn't recommend to you. I said that, hey, this movie, the theme of it is great, but it's not a great movie, and you went and watched it. And I was like, oh, so now every other recommendation is like suspect. But as far as rock and roll and that whole attitude that you would appreciate, you should check out The Pick of Destiny. That movie, you can find it. I think that you would be entertained beginning to end, but in such a rock and roll back in the day type vibe. If you've not seen it, dude, has anybody out there seen Pick of Destiny by what's the band's name with Jack Black and the other dude?
Tenacious D.
Tenacious D. You so have to check out that movie, because it's total the era type thing vibe, let's say. Yeah, and Meatloaf is in it as well.
Meatloaf was all over the place. Meatloaf sang lead on a few Ted Nugent songs.
Did he?
Yeah, on Free for All and Cat Scratch Fever.
You know what I used to think was a ripoff?
What's that?
You're not gonna like this. I accepted it because I like the music, but I used to think Santana was not that he's a ripoff, but the whole idea of him having other people sing his stuff, and it's not Santana vocalizing it, he's playing the guitar. I was like, oh man, it's not quite. There was a certain thing to it for me.
I'm cool with that completely, because some people can play guitar and just can't sing. Kenny Wade Shepherd is one of them too. He doesn't like to sing. It's not that he has a bad voice. It's just that he's not a spectacular singer. So he gets vocalists who can do the music justice. He's an excellent guitarist.
Did you know that Stevie Ray Vaughan wasn't really at the beginning intent on being a vocalist? It just just turned out that way because
he didn't want to sing. He wanted to be the guitarist. Yeah.
So there's little twists along the way like that.
But that's something that I don't think he gets enough credit for. He was a damn good vocalist for that style of music. He was a damn good singer. He had a good voice for that style. Last little thing about Meatloaf. His real name is Marvin Aday. My next door neighbor is his cousin. And we're still waiting for him to come over for a family reunion. It just hasn't happened yet.
Your literal next door neighbor?
Yeah. My back fence neighbor. Yeah.
Isn't that great how famous by association is almost just as good? Hey, did you know that 5 blocks away, the uncle that married the sister of the cousin of so and so, I don't know, Janis Joplin back in 1967.
Yeah. Well, I know
They
the guy
live
that used to groom his cat. Yeah. Uh-oh, we got some Pink Floyd love out here. Add Pink Floyd The Wall to must-have list. And I'm kind of with, I don't know. I'm kind of with, and I'm kind of, I don't know. I'm back and forth with this because we got saying, I prefer Dark Side of the Moon to The Wall. It depends on the mood. I can sit and listen to Dark Side of the Moon. And here's a tip for those of you who aren't into Pink Floyd. You don't listen to Pink Floyd songs. You listen to Pink Floyd albums. If you don't have the time to drop the needle on side one, listen to it all the way through, flip it over, drop the needle on side two and listen to it all the way through, don't even take it out of the sleeve. You have to listen to the whole album. With that behind us, there's two different moods there. I mean, I can listen to The Wall and get just as into it as I can Dark Side of the Moon. It just depends on the mood.
The Wall's pretty. The Wall's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
The Dark Side of the Moon is a sonic. I don't know, man. I think that those two albums are really freaking awesome. And to me, The Wall, because I was walking around with my little cassette player listening to it back in the day, it had been out. Let's be clear.
Yeah, it came out when I was 11.
Yeah, it had been The Wall. Well, no.
Well, Dark Side of the Moon had. The Wall came out in, 77, something like that?
79, probably?
Wall, yeah, something like that.
Well, the Wall itself, that album, which is the one I'm talking about, I couldn't believe how many tracks of awesomeness and variation was on. It was just mind-blowing. Like, you could listen to that, and you spend your whole afternoon listening to that stuff back in the day. It was so awesome.
Yeah, The Wall came out in 79.
Okay.
So yeah, it really is. And I mean, Roger Waters is another one. He writes epic music.
Well,
so
they have their differences in attitudes towards writing music. What's this guy? Gilmour?
David Gilmour, yeah.
More sonic tapestry.
Yes. But you put the two of them together, and that was some of the best music that was ever created. I mean, it's not to take away anything from either one of them, but you put the two of them together, and it was just freaking awesome.
It was the best. It was the best when they both participated.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, don't get me wrong; they're both good on their own. They're both excellent on their own. Who am I kidding? But what can you say?
I don't like Roger Waters' solo album. I think it was something Hitchhiker or something or other, Killer Hitchhiker. I forget the name of it, but it was all like little sounds like doors shutting.
Oh man,
screaming. It was, the whole album was like that.
He got onto that kind of a thing early on with Pink Floyd. He wanted to do that album. It was not too long after Syd Barrett dropped out, after he was let's just face it, he was pushed out, and he wanted to do that album. And I remember Nick Mason was talking about it on one documentary I was watching. He says, we absolutely sat there with cardboard boxes and rubber bands, and after really trying to make this work and sound good, I looked up at Rick Wright and said, what the hell are we doing? What are we doing? And Gilmour said, well, I was waiting for somebody else to say it. I didn't want to be the first. And Rick Wright just was like, no, this ain't going to work. So they kind of pushed it aside, went on to other things.
I mean, they were far out if you think about it, because they really went to the limit. There was a lot of bands that took it to the limit of sonic awesomeness.
And they were all about the stage spectacle and the music. They wanted to be just the band off in the corner playing. They didn't want to be in the spotlight. And that's why all the special effects and the pyrotechnics and the airplanes and the flying pigs and all this other stuff, they wanted you to focus on the sound, not the people playing the sounds. But they knew that you were going to a concert, you had to have something to see. So the stage spectacle was created for them. I mean, David Gilmour has spent the last 10 years he was active. He spent more time in the spotlight than the previous 30. You know, they just didn't want to be out front.
I'll tell you this much. I do not, they're incredibly well made, but I do not like, I'm not too keen on David Gilmour's solo works because it's Pink Floyd-ish. Because, I mean, frankly,
yeah,
that's his style on the Pink Floyd, but it's too spacey.
Some of it is good. Some of it just depends on the mood, man.
No, I own like 3 or 4, and I tried to sit through them, and everything is too spacey. And I'm not a huge, but he's an awesome, but I'm not a huge because there's a lot of empty spaces there, and I think that Roger Waters gives it a little bit of that,
right? And that's what I mean. They were the best together. But yeah,
just like Lennon and McCartney.
You know, I mean, you can't take away from Gilmour's musical ability.
Oh, he kicked ass.
Oh yeah.
I'm not even going there. I'm just saying that as far as enjoyment, there's a lot of spaciness going on there, and which is fine. It's great. But if you ever there's an album called On an Island, and like it's very dreamy. You have to be totally off your. You have to be like.
You have to be in a certain place to listen to it. Yeah, I get it. Now I'm trying to figure out who Diss My Dog is. I'm thinking it might be David Jones, but I'm not sure. Says you got that guitar played by Dolly Parton. Yes, I have it right up here in a case. And the way we ended up with that guitar was, in fact, it's Linda's guitar. I bought it for her. My platoon sergeant at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, was Dolly Parton's cousin. And he had that guitar. He didn't want to play it anymore, just wanted to sell it. And I said, well, Linda has expressed kind of wanting a guitar. How much you want for it? We made a deal. I gave him the money. He gave me the guitar. And I said, now if I could just get your cousin to autograph it for me. He says, oh, she'd probably do it, but I haven't seen her in a while. You know, she played that guitar on stage once. And what? Yeah, she played that guitar one time in Dollywood, in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee.
That's cool.
So it was played on stage by Dolly Parton.
I've been to Dollywood back in the day.
Yeah. She turned 75 today. Wow. God. Everybody's getting old, man. Everybody's getting old.
That's a rumor.
Yeah, well.
That's just a rumor.
Okay, Diss My Dog says, do you think it was Dada or just Cryptic? Which one? Which one? I don't think that's David, because I don't see David listening to Pink Floyd. Do you?
No. And Norm mentioning Dada and Cryptic.
Rick French says, damn, now you got Dolly Parton, Pee Wee Herman. Hey, good looking stuck in my head. Just here to help, man. Just here to help.
let me share this with you, Mark, and everyone. So, you know, as far as the country music is concerned, I was never much into that, but I spent a time in the Everglades, and I know it's not the Blue Ridge Mountains but Smoky Mountains or whatever. But it's the Everglades, and it's quite the swampy. I guess the closest equivalent would be a Louisiana kind of type because of certain, you know, environmental similarities. But so I had a good friend of mine. His name was Les Blanchard, and after work, I was like 20 something, and after work he'd say, Eloy, come on, let's go over to Homestead, and we'll stop at bars along the way, and we'll have some food and stuff, and we'd hang out. And so, all right, let's go, Les. And we'd jump in his truck, and we'd be driving down just a solitary road into another solitary road into another, and just pine trees everywhere. And we'd stop at the first bar, we'd drink and stuff, and just little shacks along the way. Just here, I mean, there's places, and they pop in, $1, I guess, or whatever, in the jukebox, and we'd play, I forget his name now that we're talking about it. He said, "Hey, good looking, what you got cooking?"
Hank Williams.
And because of the ambiance, the setting, the drinking of the beer, little barbecue shacks, drive, just that whole experience, I started listening to it, and I got into the vibe of it. But when you're from Miami, you're in reality, if you're from Miami, you're thinking of the pop music, but the underbelly of it, I guess, would be the heavy metal and stuff. There is rock and rollers here. And so you're not privy to the whole country stuff, but in that little way, I started consuming that music, and it was good to do it with beer and barbecue. So I enjoyed it, and I started liking it. And that's how I got into, then I started listening to the older stuff. Not every day, but you get what I'm saying.
I went through a short spell of country. John Connolly, Waylon Jennings, that kind of thing. It didn't last very long. I never really got into Hank Williams. I listened a little bit to Hank Williams Jr. when he was real popular in the 80s. A little bit, not much. I didn't really, I wasn't a Charlie Pride or George Jones kind of guy, but I can appreciate what it was for what it was. It was very emotional stuff. But some of the new country I do like, I say new country, I'm talking about like from the 90s, but
that's new country.
Yeah. So
I like that. I like that Roman harp playing. That's that new stuff.
New stuff, yeah. But I like all genres of music, man. I can get into some Zydeco. I can get into bluegrass. I can get into some country. I mean,
that medieval fiddle playing, that stuff, that brand new stuff. Just the other day, that medieval stuff. That stuff is pretty darn good.
Yeah, I mean. Some of the folk stuff is pretty good. It just depends on what it's about. Folk music always mystified me. I mean, you got a bunch of drunk people sitting around listening to a guy singing a song about a mining disaster, and 600 orphans and widows on the street, stuff like that. One more time. Yeah, give us more. Okay, 700 orphans and widows in the street, whatever. But it folk kind of, I don't know, it was kind of strange to me.
It has its
it has its place.
That's where Bob Dylan came out of, because he enjoyed it. But he actually, what do you call it when you overtake something? I guess you overtake. He snatched that whole genre and basically dominated it, bar none. Yeah. But he was truly, even though he grew up, I think, in Minnesota, but he was more of a rock and roll kid. He overtook that whole genre of folk, and they idolized him.
Until he walked out on stage with the Stratocaster. Then they booed him off the stage. How dare you play an electric guitar at a folk festival?
Yeah.
I mean, and that, to me, that was the height of ridiculousness.
There's video of it, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's video of him going up on stage with it, and the crowd booing the crap out of him he did the whole set, I believe it was, with them booing. And he, ever since then, has done strange things where he's not there to please the crowd with what they expect to get from him. It's a weird...
And that's why he changes everything constantly. was one of the few things that he will do the same way every time. And this is what I heard in an interview. He so much loved the way Hendrix did all along the Watchtower. That's the way he does it now. That faster pace and more or less to Hendrix's rhythm.
In his mind.
In his mind, exactly.
Yeah, because I'm sorry, it's like, but yeah. Hey, look, I think that we're
we covered it.
We covered it.
Because
we could go on.
We have. We have in the past. But it's time for Steve to wake up. He's had his nap. It's done and over. So we'll go ahead and thank you, Frankie, for sending me that link. He sent me a link. He was talking about let me find it here. Scroll back up. He sent me a link to, oh, come on. I'll just go over to the message. It's one of the tunes his great uncle's band back in the day did. It's called the Creepers. I'm assuming that's the name of the band. And the song is called Fried Potatoes. I'll check it out. And, hey, what the heck? If it's a decent tune, I'll go ahead and I'll put it on the Trampled Underfoot Podcast Facebook page. This part won't be on the podcast, the audio podcast, but we'll just let folks head over there and check it out. So
yeah, I mean,
so now we know that was his great uncle. Okay, yeah,
post it there and we'll check it out.
Mm-hmm. If it's decent. I mean, I don't want to embarrass anybody, but I mean, they made a record. I mean, how bad could it be?
Oh no, wait a second. No, but there's no. Let's put it this way.
Okay.
How bad can how bad? I'm gonna say, how bad can it be?
It could be atrocious, but I'm not going to do that to Frankie. So what I'll do right now is I will open it up, and I've got it muted. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to post it right here live. I will post it on the Trampled Underfoot Podcast Facebook page. I'm over there now. Oh my God. This my dog. I just saw my I just saw my private messages. This my dog is my dog. I'm not going to embarrass him in public, but I'll go over here to the Trampled Underfoot Podcast Facebook page. I'll paste it, and
one of my favorite bands to fall asleep to, let's say. And I always do this. I forget the darn name of the band from the 60s, Vanilla Fudge. I love listening to Vanilla Fudge, eyes closed, headphones on, laying on the bed, and letting them just play their craziness, their jazz / rock / jam band. Freaking love it.
I'm that way with the Byrds. I could listen to that 12 string of Roger McGuinn all day long. And I have. I'm that way with the Byrds, man. Oh man. Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay. The Lost Dog Street Band. No relation. And it's beyond beautiful folk country. You don't strike me as a folk country kind of person. I know who Dis My Dog is now, but I'm not going to embarrass him. I'll wait and talk to him later and see if
Snow Crusher says his aunt sings jazz.
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 That's how they pronounce it up there in the Great White North, eh?
Jazz. So when we're up in Canada, correct me if I'm wrong, and we're at at a jazz bar and we want to yell out at the band, we say, play some more of that funky jazz.
Well, now maybe that's her last name. Is her husband's first name Hugh?
Hugh Jazz.
Greg, you ain't gonna live that down. Hey, John Cousins, how you doing? You're just in time to miss us. We're getting ready to Fat Fingers and No Glasses. That's a story of my life, man. So Fat Fingers and No Glass. You know what? That's the name of my new garage band. Fat Fingers and No Glasses.
We've got a lot of bright ideas. We just need to fill in the music part.
Oh yeah, I got a lot of ideas. It's just most of them suck.
All right, so we're out of here, guys. Enjoy the rest of your week. Come back and check us out. Check out the Facebook page. We are out of here.
All right. Take care.